Okay, so we'll make a start. Mr. Many, would you like to go through the protocol, please?
Thank you, Convener. Welcome to this meeting of Dundee City Council's Scrutiny Committee, which is being held remotely in terms of Section 43 of the Local Governance in Scotland Act 2003. All members in attendance are able to fully participate in the meeting, which is being recorded. Should any member need to leave the meeting for any reason, can they please use the chat to advise of this? If a member loses their connection, they should make every effort to rejoin the meeting. If this is not possible, the Committee Services Officer will note their absence for the remainder of the meeting. If you have to leave the meeting due to a declaration of interest, you must remain out of the meeting until invited back in. Would all members please mute their microphones when not speaking to avoid background noise, and turn off any smart speakers. Please start the meeting with your camera on. Your face will appear on the screen when you are speaking. If your connection is poor, you may wish to turn off your camera and see if this improves matters. If this doesn't help, you may wish to quickly leave the meeting and rejoin. If you wish to raise a point of order, ask a question, speak on any item or move a motion or amendment, please use the chat when the relevant item is called. The convener will then invite me to speak. Would members of the press and public please not post messages in the chat? Where items are for noting, or where there has been no disagreement expressed, the convener will call for any member who has a contrary view to indicate this through the chat. Otherwise, the item will be agreed. Please would members not use the chat for any other purposes, as those joining the meeting by telephone cannot see the chat and therefore will not be able to follow the debate. Although we are operating in a different way, this is still a formal meeting of the committee, and the required standards of behaviour and discussion are the same as in a face-to-face meeting. Standing orders will apply to the proceedings, and the terms of the Councillors' Code of Conduct will also apply in the norm. Does any member have any queries regarding this procedure? There are no queries, Convener, so I will now ask the Committee Services Officer to take a roll call for the minute. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I will now take a roll call for a minute, and I would ask if members would confirm they are present when I call their names. Bailey Keenan.
Present.
Bailey Wright.
Present.
Bailey McPherson. Bailey McPherson.
See him there, but he's gone on mute.
Yeah, thanks. I'll mark him as present. Bailey Scott.
I'm here, but unfortunately my camera doesn't appear to be working. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Deputy Lord Provost Cordell.
Present.
Thank you. Bailey Roberts.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor El Nakla.
Present.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Short.
I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the roll call. It takes you on to declarations of interest. As we're not any members of any declarations to the content of agenda as it stands. Okay, and there being no declarations, then it takes you on to item 2, Fire and Rescue Quarterly Performance Report.
Maybe before we ask the fire service to come on that, if I could just say a few words about Jason Sharp, who this would have been his last scrutiny committee after some 27 years in the fire service. And someone suggested that I say a few words, and so I asked these friends for a few comments, a few embarrassing moments that they could tell me about, and knowing that people were still working with him probably wouldn't want to do that. I didn't get much response, so I tried ex-fire brigade members and friends that I know for a few comments and got screeds and screeds of stuff. But however, this is a very serious committee of council, so I'll leave that to his friends when he has his farewell within his own office for them to give that level of ribbon. I think I'd just like, from the point of view of the Scrutiny Committee and Dundee City Council, to mark the appreciation of the service that he's delivered over the 27-year. In his time as the Chief Officer for Tayside, there's been endless challenges, and indeed, obviously, even in the report that we're about to go through, mentions Storm Babette, the flooding, the storm damage, and the amount of rescue work that went on by the fire service through that period of time. So a different landscape, I suppose, for the sort of 20 odd year ago when he started, but nevertheless a service well delivered. And you know, as a service that, well, I appreciate the divisional commander's role, really ought to acknowledge each and every individual member of the fire service for the work that they do on behalf of the city. So I'll leave it at that. Don't know if anyone else wants to make a comment or in relation to Jason that's not here to hear it, but you might want to listen to the recording later. We'll move on then, will I?
Okay, thank you very much, Convener. Then you've got item 2 before you, the Fire and Rescue Quarterly Performance Report.
Is there someone looking to lead me through that from the fire service?
Yeah, Convener, thanks. That'll be myself. First and foremost, good afternoon, Convener and elected members. And as I say, first and foremost, thanks very much for your kind words. And I'm sure Jason will listen back to them, and he'll be a big loss to the service with the amount of experience that he takes with him and the amount of knowledge that he's passed on over the years. So again, thank you very much for that. As you say, it's been a challenging, and I would like to introduce the Q3 report for the local area. And it has, as I say, it has been a challenging period with a lot going on, some of which you alluded to there with Bonfire Night and Storm Babette and other areas that you'll have alluded to, you'll have read about in the report that we'll cover very shortly. I'll just start by introducing myself again. It's good to see some familiar faces. Some of you may remember me from the length of time that I spent in the area. So I'm Scott Gibson. I'm just stepping in to hold the fort for Jason today, if you like. So, as I say, I'll introduce the report in a couple of areas that's going on across the service. It has been a positive period over the last while with some of the work that's going on. Members will be aware of the changes that were implemented back in July with the unwanted fire alarm signals that were aimed at reducing our attendance at these and reducing the road risk and giving us more time and resources for other activities, such as training and community engagement. And we've seen a downturn in the numbers of these types of incidents that we're attending. However, it is still very early in the process, and we've not started producing any official statistics to show the impact of this and the other work that we've been managing to carry out because of the outcomes of this policy. So it was just to let members know that we will be reporting on that going forward once we start to produce those statistics and give that information, and if you like, some of the other good work that we're managing to carry out in the local areas with the time that we're taking back from attending these types of incidents. I'll just now hand over to Station Commander Chris Bonner, who we've got on the call with us today from the local area, to go through some of the local context in regards to the Q3 report. And then from that, as per normal procedures, we'll be happy to and welcome any questions that members may have. So I'll hand over to yourself, Chris.
Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon to everybody. I'll do a summary of the report that was submitted by Group Commander Paul Robertson. And then, as Scott has intimated, then be open to any questions that are felt needed. The summary of the report will make reference to the following pages within your scrutiny meeting pack. Page 8 for the performance summary, page 9 for your highlights, page 21 Appendix 1 and page 23 Appendix 2. So what I'll do is I'll just talk through each priority individually. So priority 1, improving fire safety in the home. Accidental dwelling fires are down on last quarter and the same quarter last year. Incidents of this type are below the 3-year average. Where crews have attended, the trend is limited action required, with the majority of incidents requiring no firefighting action. 0 fatal casualties and 2 non-fatal casualties at 1 incident where first aid was given by the fire service at scene. but the casualty was not removed to hospital. Performance-wise, Dundee Community Action Team and Operational Watches continue to carry out home fire safety visits in partnership with Dundee City Council Social Work and other partner agencies supporting vulnerable people in the city. During the quarter, 315 home fire safety visits were carried out in Dundee. Along with Police Scotland and community wardens, community safety activity held a fire safety and a crime reduction and community safety events at Asda and Morrison's. With regards to priority 2, improving fire safety and resilience in the business community, there were 5 non-domestic building fires in Q3, with one being a significant fire, sadly resulting in loss of life. There was also extensive damage to the building, the shop and surrounding buildings. This incident is currently under joint investigation with our partners in Police Scotland, so I'm unable to offer too much detail at present. The other 4 incidents were limited in damage and firefighting action required. With regards to performance, during Q3, a total of 106 premises were carried fire safety enforcement audits. There were 50 short-term let applications from Dundee City Council. However, only 3 met the criteria to require an audit. Fire safety enforcement officers worked with partner agencies to carry out sports ground inspections at Dens Park, and they are supportive of supporting the asylum seeker accommodation in the city. Priority 3, minimising the impact of unintentional harm. There were 10 road traffic collisions attended by the fire service during Q3. When we investigated further, there was no patterns or trends regarding location. There were 0 fatal casualties, 3 non-fatal casualties, with only 1 requiring to be extricated from the vehicle. During Q3, the focus was around preparing for Halloween and bonfire night and the potential antisocial behaviour. Dundee Community Action Team worked with a wide range of partners to help reduce fire-related antisocial behaviour, with school talks carried out by them and operational watches to provide pupils with bonfire night safety messages. Daily briefings sent to partners to enhance shared situational awareness were well received. There was also a focus on water safety and the dangers of entering water courses, and the Community Action Team are working with partners to enhance warning signage around known locations of risk. Road Safety and Educational Initiative was delivered to Dundee High School in December in partnership with the Road Policing Unit. This initiative is being scheduled for all high schools in Dundee over 2024. As Scott mentioned there, priority 4 is reducing UFAS, unwanted fire alarm signals. Dundee crews were mobilised to 172 UFAS during Q3, compared to 346 in the same quarter last year. This is again a welcome reduction, meaning there's less disruption to training, inspections and planned community events for our operational crews. Information on the types of property and cause are detailed on page 15 of this report or page 17 of the meeting pack. Operational crews and enforcement officers do take time to educate duty holders at the time of the incident to further reduce these unnecessary blue light journeys, which present risk to firefighters and their communities. Priority 5, reducing deliberate fires. There was a welcome reduction from previous quarters with deliberate primary fires, but the 34 incidents are unfortunately still above the 3-year average. There were 18 vehicle fires, with these figures being investigated further with our colleagues in Police Scotland to identify patterns, trend and possible reasons. And the fire service are offering support in the form of fitting male guards and carrying out targeted home fire safety visits in these areas as part of a safety plan. The fire service attended 92 deliberate secondary fires, which is a reduction on Q1, which was 222, and Q2, which was 118. So a positive trend that will hopefully indicates the educational work is starting to have an impact. Performance-wise, a massive amount of work by fire service and partners went into Q3 for the preparation of Halloween and bonfire night. There's a Scottish Fire and Rescue report that's available and can be shared with elected members if they so wish, detailing the work across the period. Particular highlights are the Community Action Team working to reduce unofficial bonfires that are occurring in the lead up to and including bonfire night. There was also significant work preparing for the increased risk within the Curtin area on Halloween night, which resulted in significant public disorder and antisocial behaviour. As part of our joint initiative with Police Scotland and Community Safety Wardens, fire safety, crime reduction and community safety events were held at Asda and Morrison's. Dundee Community Action Team and Operational Watches also continued to be proactive in working with partner agencies to reduce the number of deliberate set fires that we attend in the form of joint school visit talks across all ward areas, and continued targeted work via the multi-agency tasking and coordinating group, where all aspects of fire-related and other associated antisocial behaviour are discussed. Fire and Rescue Operational Watches, Community Action Team and Police Scotland youth volunteers also delivered business letters which provided local businesses advice on the storage of bins and combustible waste to prevent any deliberate fires in the lead up to bonfire night. Feedback has been very positive and the fire service are looking to replicate this in form of fire perspective in Dundee. Priority 6, effective risk management and preparedness. As Scott has alluded to as well, Q3 was a very busy period with Storm Babette and the Halloween and bonfire preparations. The pre-planning briefings for this period meant that crews were well informed, prepared and kept up to date with the latest developments. Storm Babette saw crews from all over Dundee deployed across a wide area. Through strategic mobilising, crews from across Scotland were brought into the city to support operational incidents and provide cover at Dundee stations during spate conditions. The Met Office had issued various warnings, including red, danger to life across the country, with the northeast of Scotland being worst affected. The incident support room at McAlpine Road was stood up with flexi-duty managers mobilised and recalled to duty to support our control room colleagues during these spate conditions, predominantly caused by rain and flood water. Local Resilience Partnership was also supported by the fire service, where senior managers were there to ensure partners were aware of the incidents being attended and the resources deployed across the area. These incidents were in addition to the routine calls to other types of incidents, such as accidental dwelling fires, road traffic collisions, UFAS, etc. Lastly, I'd just like to touch upon the Appendix 1, Community Safety Engagement. Kingsway Fire Station had their second year of the Christmas Toy Appeal, where presents from the watches were handed to NHS Health and Inclusion Department. Presents were delivered to Midcraigie, Linlath and Whitfield community hubs to disadvantaged and vulnerable children. In total, 89 presents were provided for children across the city. Support and donations were gratefully received from Dundee Bairns, who also supported the advertising, and Toymaster, who offered discounted prices on toys. Support was also received from a number of people and groups. And lastly, with Appendix 2, notable incidents, in addition to Storm Babette and bonfire, crews at Kingsway did familiarisation training with RNLI to have a shared understanding of the capabilities and the working partnership they would have. And lastly, a demonstration of our swift water rescue technicians was held, and demonstrations of throw lines to the community wardens. Lastly, for information or discussion on more localised incidents or fire and rescue activity within the various wards, the 8 LCPPs, Local Community Planning Partnerships, are scheduled for the next month, and they're attended by myself for Dundee East and my colleague for Dundee West, who can answer or help with more support for localised issues. That completes my summary of the report, Convener.
Thanks very much for that. I'll start with some questions then with Billy McPherson to start with.
Thanks, Convener. And can I first of all join you in thanking Jason for his excellent service over a great many years. His experience will be missed, frankly, and we wish him a long and happy retirement. I could also thank Scott and Chris for their introduction. That was very detailed. I have to say, in addition to the high quality work undertaken in keeping our communities safe, I think the community work around Christmas that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service were involved in is commendable, and we're very grateful to Scottish Fire and Rescue Service colleagues for that. With your indulgence, Convener, we have discussed this. I view, and I know you also view, concern about the fact that scrutiny in a public sense, and I get the bit about the LCPPs, but the bottom line is, in a public sense, with the media present as well as the public, it is disappointing that the decision of the council was not to take back scrutiny to all elected members. Now, henceforth, it is my intention, convener, of sharing the scrutiny papers with my 3 group colleagues. And therefore, with your indulgence, because I know that I'm entitled to a minimum of 2 questions in terms of standing orders, but I actually have more than 2 questions today. In fact, I have 3 for Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, if that's okay. And I'll start with one that actually comes from Councillor Duncan, and it's in relation to the information on page 13, which is the welcome information about the work that is done in relation to audit. And that's largely around HMOs, care homes, hotels, B&Bs, licensed premises, and so on. What I was really wanting to raise on behalf of Councillor Duncan is that there's an increasing number of, I suppose we would term them, Airbnbs across the city. And in fact, I think his ward has the largest single number. And I was be grateful on behalf of Councillor Duncan if you could indicate to me what audit work is done in relation to these, because quite frankly, the facilities and offer largely measure those of B&Bs. And I was just really wondering if I could have some more information about that. Thank you.
Okay, someone able to give a response?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Sorry, couldn't get myself off mute quick enough there. Yeah, thanks for the question. In regards to Airbnbs, I would have to refer to my legislative colleagues in the service to get some local information and local context on the state of play with the Airbnbs in the area and the legislative requirements of SFRS around inspections of Airbnbs. So if it's okay with the councillor, unless Chris got anything to add, I would like to go and do some background work on that and bring back an answer direct to yourself to relay with your colleagues. Is that okay?
Yeah, if you could get back to myself and Councillor Duncan on that. I think the concern is around.
Can I maybe ask that? Can I maybe ask that if you're given that the question's been asked at scrutiny, that the whole of the scrutiny committee is circulated with your response, and which is everybody's aware of the type of legislation that governs these things.
Yeah, no problem at all, convener. Yeah. What we can do is bring that back to next scrutiny as a highlight, and report back to the committee as a whole.
Totally agree with you, convener, on that. I wouldn't want any form of response just to be the next scrutiny committee, which is a quarter away. So although happy that it's included in the scrutiny papers next time, a response to all the members of the scrutiny committee meantime would be helpful. I think the issue, Scott, is around, has the legislation kept up with the pace of Airbnbs and your requirements? Because I think it's a fast moving area. There were no B&Bs a decade ago, and so it would be useful to get that information. My second question actually comes from Councillor Coleman, and it's in relation to the information on page 21 and the good work that Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, along with partners, were undertaking around Halloween and Bonfire Night, and the partnership working around that. Councillor Coleman particularly wanted to thank you for the engagement at both Morrison's and also at Asda Kirton, which we felt, in light of the issues that there have been in the local area, was a welcome thing. The messaging that had previously been put out basically by the council over the years, and I dare say by Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and other aspects of the emergency services, the police, was always around to try to discourage private displays and encourage people to go to public displays. And we view as detrimental the fact that there are no public displays now, as we used to have at Balgay and at Baxter Park in past years, because we always felt they provided an ultra safe environment for the public. And I was just really wondering what the messaging at these events, for example, what happened at Morrison's and Asda, is in relation to the messaging to the public as to whether or not they should have a fireworks display, given that, frankly, fireworks are small explosives and can cause immense injuries and problems if not in the right hands.
Thanks again, Councillor. I'll start to answer that and then maybe hand over to Chris for some of the more local context on the messaging. But as you would appreciate, the SFRS, from an SFRS perspective, our messaging would relate directly to the legislative arrangements around the sales and the arranging of events around fireworks and bonfires. But I don't know, Chris, if you were involved locally in the stations and the messaging around the two supermarkets that the council alludes to.
No, sorry, Scott, I wasn't involved in that, and I would support the sort of safe use. And as Councillor McPherson has intimated previously, we would always encourage them to go to the organised displays and discourage the use of that. The things we would also have is, if they were using sparklers and things like that, would be to have plunge buckets and safe media there, and almost like a risk assessment to make sure that if something were to go wrong, there's a way of extinguishing, but combustible materials at safe distances. But as Councillor McPherson rightly pointed out, from our perspective, it was always to encourage people to go to organised displays.
I'm grateful for that response, and I think it just makes the point that perhaps at some point revisiting the whole issue of organised displays would be welcome. I see Jason's got his hand up at this point, so I will be quiet a moment.
Okay, Jason.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor. So we were going to talk about our preparations for Moonbeam and Fireworks Night come up this year. So what I've done is I've tasked Adam Smith, who's my partnership superintendent, to work with Dundee City Council around the consultations for firework control zones. So it's a new piece of legislation that allows us to put controls in terms of who possesses fireworks. And that particularly relevant when we consider what happened in Kirkton last year. So that consultation extends for a period of 32 weeks. So my quick maths was that we need to be sort of initiating that within the next couple of weeks to ensure that we give the full 32-week consideration for that. But as I said, it will be Adam Smith and my partnership superintendent will liaise with Dundee City Council to explore that scenario. But I would echo the fire services advice in terms of attending organised displays if they are available. And what I like to see is a connected, cohesive community safety messaging from all of us, from Dundee City Council, from the police and from the fire service in the run up to Fireworks Night. So that's certainly what I'd be seeking this year.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Jason. Obviously, the situation now is there are no public displays, and I think that, frankly, is to be regretted. But I'm grateful for your comments about the firework control zones, because if we're going to take this forward, it's important it's done timiously. Obviously, in a way, the boat was maybe missed in 2023, and that's not a criticism, because I'm conscious it was June before the legislation and guidance was even in place. But clearly, we should have time this year if it is to be taken forward locally. Convener, with your indulgence, I have one last question, if that's okay.
Well,
thanks.
You know that in relation to scrutiny, I don't feel that we should ever control the questions just to three. You know, it's about trying to sort of flush out the issues, and I'm happy for you to ask as many questions as you like, as that of everyone else.
Yeah.
So carry
Thanks.
on.
Well, that's very good of you, Convener, and I'm grateful for that view. We've restricted to 3, and I think it's the same number for police, to be honest, this time, but I note your very helpful comment. The final question actually comes from myself, and it's in relation to deliberate primary fires. And whilst there was a welcome reduction in these in 22-23 compared to 21-22, we've noticed a bit of a spike again in 23-24. And at the moment, if I've worked out rightly, we're almost 3/4 of the way through the financial year, we're at almost twice the target. And I appreciate the challenges for Scottish Fire Rescue Service around that. What I was really wondering was, within the deliberate primary fires sphere, as I understand it, there are three sort of types of fires. There's house fire, non-domestic, property fires, and vehicle fires. And I was wondering if, for a start, if a breakdown of these can be supplied in relation to the total number, but also is the trend in one particular area within these, i.e. home or non-domestic or vehicle in particular?
Thanks again, Councillor. Again, I'll pass to Chris very shortly for some of the more local context and local knowledge. But if members would like us to break down those statistics periodically for further scrutiny, then that's doable. We can do that. We can do that through our systems and analytics, and bring that to these meetings, just to give you a further breakdown of the areas of concern. I suppose I would just highlight the amount of work that we do try and do in partnership with our police colleagues and our other partners and stakeholders across the area in regard to antisocial behaviour and fire raising. And we do put, as you're well aware, we put a lot of effort into that side of things. And it is an area that inherently we've seen high numbers across the city over a number of years now, and something that we're continually trying to drive down and put a lot of effort into. But I don't know if you've got any of that local context, Chris, for now on the breakdown further.
Thanks, Scott. The only breakdown I do have is as mentioned in the report, is the 18 for motor vehicles, which is an extremely high number. And when you put that into the 34 in total, it's over 50% of them are vehicle fires. Some of the primary build fires were possibly linked to these vehicle fires as well. So we are working closely with our colleagues in the police, and as I said, the fitting of male guards, the sharing of intelligence, and we're looking to address that side of things. We can, like Scott mentioned, we can certainly break down into the three areas. With regards to non-domestic buildings, we tend to look for buildings and we liaise with partners with regards to build-up of sort of combustible materials or derelict properties and things like that as well. The one of concern to ourselves just now is, and the one that's caused the major spike, is certainly the vehicle fires. But however, it is being addressed through our work with the police colleagues.
I'm grateful for that response. Thank you.
Okay. I think it may be useful to have that level of breakdown on occasion, so as that we can scrutinise that a bit deeper. So if that could be provided, that would be useful. So you completed your questions, Bailey McPherson?
I have indeed. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm moving on then to Bailey Scott.
Thank you, Convener. I've managed to get my camera to work now as well. Can I start just by saying I'd like to be associated with the earlier comments that were made about Jason, and also to say that I have 3 questions as well, Convener, and I know you've always been very relaxed when it comes to the number of questions that are being asked, so thank you for that. The first question is regarding to the accidental dwelling fires, and it's good to see that's come down this quarter and there's a downward trend. But I just wondered if over the years what the main reason for the accidental fires are, and whether that's remained the same over the years. And when it comes to doing the home safety fire visits, is the same thing coming up in the home safety fire visits as the main reason as to why there may be accidental fires?
Thanks for your question, Councillor Scott. Yeah, so you'll be aware of our campaign over a number of years now, I want to say, called Make the Call, which is basically targeted at those that maybe have mobility issues, smokers, alcohol consumption, living alone, and that's probably the main area that we see most of our accidental dwelling fires come into. And you'll be aware, obviously, that we do carry out home fire safety visits, and the main aim of these home fire safety visits is to target those that are most vulnerable in the community and present with the highest risk. So I think just to be assured that there is a lot of work that goes into targeting that demographic and those that are at highest risk through our partnership referrals and through our local knowledge. Yeah, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
Well, just wondered what the main cause for the accidental fires was. Cigarette smoking?
So predominantly, I think, Chris, you can come in and off on the back of this, but predominantly it would be cooking, as we find in most cases. It's predominantly cooking.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Just to add a bit of context to that as well, and emphasising my point with regards to the LCPPs, that allows us just that local knowledge that certainly myself, when I attend, I can break down and say, of the primary fires, so many were caused in the kitchen, so many were caused by cooking or smoking, whether it was vulnerable, whether it was alcohol or drugs or distraction. I break that down in a sort of my short summary. Home fire safety visits have certainly developed from when we first started doing them a number of years ago, and we also focus on things like electrical safety, cooking safety, fire plans, bedtime routines and things like that. I think to sort of, I don't know whether this is the forum to then break it down further, but certainly at the local ones, I can offer that, and my colleague would certainly do that on the night of the thing, or certainly break it down for further by the attendees. Detection has certainly helped, and one thing I will say is certainly in the wards that I attend, the severity of the fires is certainly reduced because we've got early detection, and we've got people who are that shut bedroom doors at night, who know what to do in the event of a fire and things like that. And in a number of cases, the fire's extinguished by removal, or smothering, or it's limited actions by the fire service.
Okay, thank you. The next question I want to ask about was under the improving fire safety and resilience in the business community, and there's mention of complaints that were received that were dealt with by yourselves, and I just wondered whether those complaints were from the public regarding a perceived fire risk in a public area, or whether they were for other areas. It's on the bottom of page 13. A number of complaints and concerns were submitted to SFRS staff.
Chris, I don't know if you've got any of that local knowledge.
So, sorry, I don't have a lot of context to that. I do know that sometimes there's been a few complaints with regards to the noise that the fire engines create, and these people live within the vicinity of the fire stations, and sometimes there was concern at time in the morning that they didn't see the need for the sirens to be set off at that time. I could certainly look into that further and try and get a breakdown. Group Commander Robertson put this report together, and I must admit that part has escaped me to look into for further detail.
Because I thought it might be members of the public complaining about a fire risk. I hadn't thought about the sounds of the sirens, so that would be useful.
I think it's twofold, Councillor. I think we do tend to receive complaints from members of the public. So maybe it's people that they know that work in the fire service locally, or it's maybe if we're attending at an incident and somebody makes us aware of maybe a bit of build up of rubbish or something like that, or some maybe disputes that they might be having with their neighbours about rubbish or about storage of things. So I think that's some of the areas that's mentioned in the report. But what we'll do is we'll get a bit more context around that, and again make sure that we'll pass that back to members.
Thank you. And my last question is priority 3, minimising the impact of unintentional harm, and was in relation to the two initiatives that you carried out. The first one on water safety. I just wondered the number of times you were called out for an incident on water, and whether that campaign will continue through the summer, where there's more likely to be young people near water. And the second part of that is to do with the road safety initiatives at schools. Is that focusing on pedestrian safety, or is it aimed at young drivers?
I'll start to answer that and then again hand over to Chris. So in regards to the water safety, so you may be aware that we've got a community safety calendar that we follow, and we're trying direct our community safety activities to the time of year. So for example, wildfires coming into spring, and for water safety coming into the warmer months. So we do a lot of work around the schools around about the springtime, going into the summer, to pass that water safety message. And we historically have done water safety roadshows in partnership with the other agencies and our partners to the schools in Dundee. We've been out to areas where we have reasonable numbers of incidents and do some messaging around those areas to groups that are using that area around water safety, and some areas where we've managed to incorporate what we call throw lines, so safety devices around water should someone get into difficulty. So yeah, we are going to continue that, and that will continue as every year through the period. Probably more emphasis around the springtime, coming into the warmer weather, when people tend to be involved in water incidents more frequently. And again, with the driver initiatives that we carry out, most of the driver initiatives are aimed around the actual drivers themselves and around road safety. However, we do I can't even remember what it's called, the safety siders that we used to do. That was like a partnership approach with all the different agencies and partners, where we went around all the primary 5 pupils, and we used to input safety in regards to road safety, in regards to electrical safety, fire safety, and just the whole life risk, if you like, around that group. And I'm not sure, Chris, if that's started up again locally in any forum, and what other road safety initiatives locally that you're engaged in at the moment and going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So with regards to the water safety, as Scott mentioned, we have sort of thematic action plans, and water will come up on a couple of occasions leading into sort of icy water and pets going into the water and people going after it, making people aware of sort of throw lines and things like that. And as Scott mentioned, yeah, coming into the warmer weather where we have areas where we see young people swimming, we try and educate them on the dangers of swimming and things like that. So that won't just be a one-stop shop. That'll certainly be done with engagement with the schools. The RTCs, the road traffic collisions, sorry, mostly aimed at drivers. We used to have the Safe Drive Stay Alive, which was run with our partners in the police. So this is like a similar sort of version to that, aimed at drivers or people who are going to be driving when turning 17, to make them aware of the safe driving aspect.
Okay, thank you. You don't happen to have a figure for the number of call-outs for water incidents, do you?
No, but that can certainly, we can certainly look into that, and I can supply that for you.
Thanks, Convener. That's me done.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Short.
Thank you, Convener. And I can remember completely 100% the bonhomie with which you said right at the beginning of 2016-17 about how much we had the opportunity to ask as much as we like, because this was the committee to do it. So I'm glad you're still sticking to that after all these years. And Chris, you'll know that I'm never shy of asking any questions. So this afternoon, mine is very much a strategic question, and it's to do with page 11, with regards to the work that you've been doing with home fire safety visits and Martingale Gardens and Mulligan Court. Now, I was very familiar that Martingale Gardens had changed from sheltered to a retirement village, and I hadn't realised, to my shame, the Mulligan Court had done the same. And I was just looking to get a reassurance that if and when RSLs are moving beyond the sheltered and creating these villages, which obviously has a different impact on the way that the buildings run, that they do make you aware of it, so you can reflect differently in the way that you deliver your information. And the other one was that you talk about the 12 high-rise inspections. Now, I know that we've got 11 that sit within the council, and there are a few additional ones up by Drybrough that are RSLs again. So when it comes to the high-rise inspections, do they work on a rota type system, or are they done on an ad hoc basis?
So thanks, Councillor Short. In regards to the first one around Martingale and Mulligan, we should be informed, obviously, if they're changing residency and occupancy, because obviously, as we know, sheltered housing and what you're describing there is different. Is a different kind of living in a different type of demographic, perhaps. So, when we're made aware of those types of those types of communities, we can go and target that area and offer out our home fire safety visit service and provide some advice where people are going from a shelter type accommodation into a more self-sufficient type of living environment. So yeah, I think just to be assured that we would carry that out. And Chris, do you want to take the second part of that question?
Yeah. So sorry, just on the first part as well. There's referral pathways through sort of housing, social work, and things like that for vulnerable persons and people who have changed, and we would welcome these, and they would be given a high risk rating purely for the fact of being a partner referral. If we are made aware of these sort of people, we will certainly do everything we can to accommodate that, and we can go out and do, if they have some sort of community room or whatever as well, we would go out and do like a group community talk about cooking safety and bedtime routines, all these sort of things. So we're more than happy to support that where we're made aware of it. With regards to the high rise, they're done on a programmed basis, and it's shared amongst different colour watches, so they all get familiarisation with the different high rises and the different locations. However, we will do known visits as a result of housing getting in touch with us. We've got a contact within the high rise that lets us know when lifts are out of operation, when hydrants aren't working. So we will then go and do a check, and then we'll almost run through a mock operational plan to ensure that what we've got planned, if odd lifts are out, if even lifts are out, and all these scenarios. So we're in a very good place with our high rise, that we've got equipment on scene held within stored cupboards that makes it easier to access lifts, lift rooms, and things like that.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Chris. And I know the sort of vulnerable person situation. I recently wrote about one of my own constituents who was a bit concerned about living on the 5th floor, but I put his mind at ease by saying that I could contact yourselves and police colleagues so that you would know that they were in the building. So it's always good to know that the backup is there. And I do know that in Martingale, again, because it's in my ward, we did have a situation last year, and it's great to see that there is these ties and you will be following them up across the city. So thank you very much. And I'll see you next week at the LCPP.
Yeah. Maybe a couple of comments from me, then a question. Firstly, I think I'd like to comment about the fundraising that the guys had done at the Kingsway station and the gifts that they'd given out at Christmas. I think it makes a real difference to those in need in the city. And, obviously we'll all probably chip in a wee bit extra at that time through the different bits that we donate, whether that's supporters, supporting food banks, but they've all done a bit extra to make sure that kids in Dundee hopefully never went without. So excellent that the fire service continue to do that kind of charitable work. It's to be commended. The other comment I would like to make for Jason was that you mentioned, Jason, that I think it's Moonbeam was the tag that you gave it in relation to fireworks and who can have them and how they would be controlled in control zones throughout the city. And whilst there's a number of shops obviously didn't sell them because they were obviously trying to be a good neighbour, there was van loads getting shipped into Curtin. And, you know, that, I suppose, is potential bomb of a van, because, you know, no doubt there isn't a great deal of precaution taken while somebody's driving about with these things. And obviously it's getting sold on the black market. So that is about what concern. And I wonder how you can make sure that your colleagues and police are aware of that so as that they can help prevent that. The other question is in relation to the non-domestic fire that was in Fintry and the loss of a life. And I know that it's under investigation, but I'm wondering how that investigation and its findings are disseminated around other organisations such as the Health and Safety Exec, or even just as another message going around shops saying perhaps you shouldn't have this amount of combustible material stored in certain areas next to a workstation perhaps, or, you know, access and egress for the employees that are there to get out quick. So wondered how that findings of that report will eventually disseminate itself through different organisations in the city to make a difference or to prevent such a thing happening again.
So thanks again, convener. In regards to the fireworks, I would probably hand over to our police colleagues maybe to give more of an insight into that. I don't think we became aware of the vans or came across the vans as such, but yeah, as we would imagine, we would be sharing. It was very much shared situational awareness around the Operation Moonbeam and the fireworks and everything that went on around that period for the planning and resilience for the incidents and for the work that was done. So we'll let our police colleagues maybe comment on that one. And in regards to, would you like to do that part first?
Yeah, if police are happy to make a comment. I mean, it's obviously something I heard on the street, so, you know, I wonder if they did as well. But
yeah, also I'll answer very quickly first and then hand over to Laura. So Operation Moonbeam was Police Scotland's response to fireworks night across Scotland. We had an Assistant Chief Constable, Tim Mayers, who was the gold for that. So as with any other operation, we work on intelligence, so that I was aware that there was a lot of reports come in that fireworks were being taken into the area. And again, where we suspect that, cars will be stopped and there will be a proactive approach around that. And that will certainly feed into our approach this year as well. So Laura, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else to that?
No, I think you have covered it, boss. Very much intelligence led, and our community officers and preventions officers were out on the ground, as you know, in the lead up to both Halloween and bonfire night, speaking to the communities, engaging with schools, and doing a lot of joint work with Scottish Fire and Rescue and other partners that Fire and Rescue have already covered. I'm not aware of a specific report of a vehicle with a large amount of fireworks, but as the boss had said, as intelligence of that nature comes in, we would certainly act on that, and that forms part of our planning for this year. Not aware of any vehicles being traced in possession of a substantial amount of fireworks on this year's event.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And in regards to the investigation, as we said, it's still under investigation, so can't really comment too much, but other than premises, the non-domestic premises are obviously legislated to carry out risk assessments in regard to the premise, and things like access and egress and emergency exits and lighting, etc., and alarm systems. So that, I think that's well known out there, and I think from any investigation, if there's any best practice that comes out of an investigation, then we'll share that on any platforms we can, or any discussions we're involved in from that investigation. Mina.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Is it Jason looking to come back in again?
Yeah, sorry, convener. Just very quickly on that. Obviously, we'll put a report through to the Fiscal Service, and there'll be the we'll decide on that and report in due course. So, but likewise, as Scott said, if there's good practice or elements to learn from that death, then we'll share that definitely with our partners.
Thanks very much for that. Okay, there's no further questions on this report. Is this report agreed? Okay, thank you. Right, Willie, we'll move on.
Okay, thanks, Convener. Item 3 then before East Dundee Policing Area Quarterly Police Report. And Chief Superintendent Carrigan's here to speak to that item.
Yeah, over to yourself.
Thank you, Convener. Elected members. I was going to make the joke about losing a Jason and gaining a Jason, but I've done that in the last couple of meetings, so I won't waste that again. So we've covered. I was going to cover sort of the fireworks control zone very quickly before Laura, but we've covered that. So the only other item I wanted to make from a strategic point of view was around our estates consultation that's happening at the moment. So that is live currently for the annex that's attached to West Bell Street, and that will be live until the 18th of February. So again, just wanted to draw the councillors again continued attention to that, and the public's continued attention to that. Then that will close on the 18th of February. Hopefully we'll get a good response to that. But the probably more relevant for our communities is the consultation for Rye Hill and Hilltown that will open shortly after that. So we'll put some more messaging out about that on our Facebook page and our social media bits. And that we really would encourage the community and councillors to sort of contribute to that. I'm aware that we've had a couple of letters in from councillors already regarding those premises as well. So that is that. On our website, there is a really good presentation from ACC Steve Johnson that explains the rationale behind why we're considering the future usage of this estate. The fact that our estate is quite big and is quite burdensome at the moment in terms of the cost to maintain, etc., inflation, all those cost of living things that we know are happening at the moment. So we want to retain visibility in our communities. That is the absolute priority for us as Police Scotland, but it's how we do that in the most efficient and effective way is the basis of this consultation. So if you're happy, I'll hand over to Laura now for the performance sort of report, and she'll take you through that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I will draw your attention to page 5 of the police report, which is our performance on a page. It is my intention just to take you through the performance figures for this quarter, and I will highlight some of the information that's contained within the rest of the report as I do that, and thereafter myself and or the boss will be happy to take questions in relation to that. So just start off with antisocial behaviour and disorder. We have provided figures for overall Group 4 crime, and this includes fire raising, vandalism and reckless conduct, as well as general antisocial behaviour incidents. I know we have already covered Moonbeam in some detail, and the fire service have highlighted some of the good work that went on both in the lead up to Halloween and bonfire night, so I won't go over what's already been covered. But in addition to that, we had our own operation, Operation Panderbull, which was a very local operation run in Dundee, mainly the Curtin area, which sat under the National Police Scotland Moonbeam operation, and a lot of work carried out in relation to that, which is highlighted on page 13 of the report. And thereafter, the community team at Downfield also carried out a significant amount of work in relation to detecting offences that were committed around that time, and you will see that 23 people were identified as being involved in criminality over that period, and the majority of them have now been formally addressed. What I would say is that a large proportion of those were juveniles, and we've had to engage with the Youth Justice Assessor to take that forward appropriately. So looking at the figures, our overall Group 4 crimes are actually down 1.2% on last year to date, and down 8.6% on the 5-year average, which is positive given we have just come through the quarter featuring bonfire night and Halloween. And antisocial behaviour incidents are also down 3.8% on last year and over 20% on the 5-year average, which is positive. Covered Moonbeam. I'd also like to highlight the City Centre initiative that ran at the end of November and into the December, and that was focused on tackling antisocial behaviour, drug misuse, shoplifting and other offences in the city centre. Received some really good feedback from the community and was covered in local media and on social media. Moving on then to violence. Firstly, robberies. So there were 24 robberies in this quarter, which is down on the same quarter for last year when we had 52 robberies. You will see that from last year to date, we are down slightly on the number of robberies that have been reported to us. Last quarter, when I reported to you, we were up 31%, so the figures have changed quite dramatically in that period, although we are still up 9.4% on the 5-year average. I'd also draw your attention to the detection rates for robberies. So at the last scrutiny meeting, the detection rate was sitting at 56% for the year. That is now up to 82.4% as further suspects have been identified and those crimes have been detected. There are still some reports under investigation and that may well increase. Similarly for serious assaults, we're down on last year to date 18.8%, which is more significant, and also down 20% on the 5-year average. Again, a number of serious assaults are still under investigation and we expect the detection rate for those to improve. So sitting at 71.8% so far this year, which is slightly down on both last year to date and the 5-year average, but we do expect several more of those to be detected. What I would say in relation to violence, and particularly robberies and serious assaults, they are very often linked to drugs misuse. And page 6 onwards of the report does highlight some of the work that we're doing to try and reduce the harm caused by drug use. These types of crimes are often committed by people who are known to each other and they're often uncooperative with the police, which leads to further challenges in us detecting those, but some positive results in the performance report at the moment in relation to robberies and serious assaults. In relation to common assaults, the figures are also down, so over 2% on last year and 5% on the 5-year average, and the detection rate is actually sitting above what our figures were for last year and the 5-year average. What I would say is the exception to that is emergency workers, where numbers are still not favourable, and we did discuss that at last quarter's meeting. Also, there are initiatives in place to try and support both police and members of staff from other emergency services who are victims of these assaults. Moving on to public protection, it's not specifically covered this quarter, however I will just run over the figures that are provided. So overall Group 2 crimes, which includes all sexual crimes, rapes, attempted rapes, indecent and sexual assaults, etc. They are up 15.2% on last year to date and they are in line with the 5-year average. Rape is up 39.4% on last year to date and also up 6% on the 5-year average. In relation to that, there is more reporting of sexual offences now, both current and historical sexual offences, which is partly the reason for those figures. Domestic abuse is also highlighted under public protection, and that remains a real challenge in Dundee. I have mentioned this previously, but we have dedicated teams in Dundee who are tackling domestic abuse. That includes our Domestic Abuse Investigation Unit and also a team based purely in Dundee called Operation Argonite, who tackle high-risk perpetrators of domestic abuse and provide support for victims. Moving on to road safety, there is a road safety spotlight on page 29 of the report. That's kindly been prepared by our road policing inspector, but covers some of the work carried out by both roads policing officers and local policing officers in the Tayside area, and not just Dundee, but very much having an impact on residents in Dundee. I won't go over the figures in too much detail, but you've all seen there that speeding offences are up and drink driving offences are down 3.5% on last year and 31% on the 5-year average. Moving on to acquisitive crime, housebreaking is covered firstly, and there's some information on page 18 of the report which goes into further detail regards acquisitive crime and housebreaking in particular, but that is down 9.4% on last year to date and 13.4% on the 5-year average. There are a number of forensic results still pending in relation to housebreakings, and you'll see there that our detection rate is 37.4%, which is down on last year. However, as I say, once we have some results of these forensics, there may well be other opportunities for detection in relation to housebreaking. In relation to motor vehicle crime, there has been a sharp increase in motor vehicle crime, and that is a national picture. So last year to date, comparatively, we're 15.3% up, and we're also 51.3% up on the 5-year average. There's a lot of organised crime in relation to motor vehicle crime. They are often linked to housebreakings as well, and there is a real issue with criminals travelling across borders at the moment committing offences in relation to motor vehicles. Keyless car theft, I'm sure you'll have seen that in the news, but is a major issue at the moment, and our acquisitive team and local officers are trying to provide car security advice in relation to that, but it is very much a national issue. In relation to fraud, fraud is actually down in Dundee on last year to date, but significantly up on the 5-year average. Much of the frauds that we're seeing committed at the moment are online, and they are complex. The investigations often take a long time for us to deal with, and quite often perpetrators are out with the UK, which causes us real challenges in terms of detection, and that is reflected in the detection rates that you'll see there. So detection is 16.7% current year to date. As I say, number of inquiries still ongoing, and that may well increase. Last year's detection rate was 24.5%, so it's still a challenge for us in terms of fraud. Shoplifting is the last item on the performance on a page. You'll see there that, again, shoplifting is significantly up, 41.4% on last year and 89% on the 5-year average, which is obviously significant. Again, a national issue, particularly hitting Dundee, and that's in the city centre and in our supermarkets and retail parks. We've recently carried out some work in conjunction with the Scottish Crime Business Prevention Team. There's been inputs to retailers from Retailers Against Crime around CCTV, retail watch schemes, etc. Our community teams in the city centre and in the localities have been out at retail parks across the festive season, in particular, providing patrols and crime prevention advice in relation to shoplifting, but it remains a real challenge for us. That is my summary of the performance on a page. I appreciate there's a lot more information in the full report, so myself or the boss, as I said, will be happy to take any questions that you have now.
Okay. I know it's Billy McPherson.
Thanks indeed, Convener, and thanks very much to Jason and to Laura for their very helpful input. My first of 3 questions, one's only really in relation to myself, is in relation to what Jason's mentioned about the proposed closure and consultation around police stations, the one adjacent to your headquarters in Bell Street, and in terms of communities, Hilltown and Rye Hill. The initial messaging about a portal or whatever it is being launched sometime in December caused a little bit of confusion, I have to say, because I actually had some engagement with Chief Superintendent Davison before he went off on secondment, and he responded basically saying, yeah, this portal is live, but Rye Hill, which is the one in my own ward, is not yet open for public consultation. What I was really wondering, Jason, was a couple of things around that. You indicated that it and Hilltown will open after the one in relation to the annex to Bell Street one has closed. What's the actual dates for that? What's the length of that? And crucially, will there be anything in relation to face-to-face engagement with the community, for example, attendance at community council meetings to explain it, or having some form of engagement event with the public? I'm very conscious of the fact that, for example, our main public building is literally a stone's throw from at Blackness Library, and I think some public engagement would be welcome. And I say that partly because there are a great many people who are not online, who do not engage in that way. And if I take Rye Hill as a very good example of that, the people closest to the Rye Hill police station are actually in the retirement housing right across the road in Pennycook Lane. And I know many of them personally, and I know that many of them are not involved or in any way engaged with anything, frankly, in the online world. So I was just really wondering if there will be anything by way of face-to-face engagement, but particularly what are the dates that this public consultation specifically about Hilltown and Rye Hill will actually launch?
Thanks, Councillor. So for the first one, I have to apologise because I haven't been given the exact dates for the opening of the public consultation for those two sites. Only that it will come after the first one, the annex, has closed. So I would expect it to be a matter of weeks after that, but I will find out the exact date and forward it to the convener for circulation. In terms of the public consultation and events and getting out, I am more than happy to attend LCPP meetings for Laura's team to come to. You know, we quite often have the coffee with a cup. Sorry, you always have it with a cup. With our officers to get out and explain, you know, the situation. And maybe I'll talk to you, Laura, about maybe some leaflets we can draw up or that give you some information around that for those people that don't have access to the internet, as you say, where the majority of the information is held. So we'll certainly respond to those concerns. I'm more than happy to get out and engage with the community around this face to face.
I'm grateful for that. I would say I don't think LCPPs is the place for it. The public engagement at LCPPs is non-existent almost.
Okay. It's
very poor indeed. And I think really you're talking about things like community councils, residents groups, but also your coffee with a cop concept. I've done joint surgeries in the past with some of the officers from Lochee, and that's been very helpful. So it'd be very good to know, specifically for the West End and Coleside communities, obviously the Hilltown one being in the Coleside ward, that there is some face-to-face engagement, and it'd be useful if that was progressed. Can I maybe raise one thing, and I know you'll not be able to answer this, but I will raise it, and I'd be grateful if you could come back. I feel a sense of deja vu about Rye Hill because we've been there before. There was an attempt to close it in 2016. And at that point, it was saved, but it was saved on the understanding that Police Scotland would engage in an attempt to see what shared use with the community could be achieved. Now, to the best of my knowledge, and I've been the local member there for 23 years, I don't remember any such engagement actually happening thereafter. And I think really that before anything's considered, and I don't just mean Rye Hill, I think Hilltown's not my community, but I'm sure the Coleside members would feel similarly. Some engagement about possible community or third sector or voluntary sector use alongside Police Scotland might be an infinitely preferable way of progressing it compared to just, if you like, closure and selling it off. So I'm not expecting you to answer this, Jason or Laura, because you know, 2016's 8 years ago. But it would be great. I'd just simply be grateful if you would sort of look into that, because I think some assurance that Police Scotland will look at possible shared use. I don't think it really applies in the case of the annex to Bell Street, but certainly in relation to the other two, I think would be really helpful, to be honest.
Yes, no problem, Councillor. So what I'll do, I'll engage with our estates team and make sure that I'm sure that would come back via the consultation anyway and be considered, but I'll make sure I'll feed in with Yvonne Johnson, who is our head of estates transformation, and make sure that those points are being considered, and that where possible we're being proactive in that sense. Because like you say, from the previous time, if we've undertaken to be proactive in that space, then we should really do that. So I'll chat to her and come back to you with an answer if that's okay.
That's extremely helpful, and I'm grateful to you, Jason, for that. Convener, with your agreement, I've got the second of three questions. The second one from Councillor Duncan, and completely unrelated to that. It's about the helpful information, I think on page 35 and again on 41, about the drug enforcement initiative that took place regarding licensed premises in Broughty Ferry in his ward. Councillor Duncan was really saying to me that he recalls there were in the past regular meetings between licensed premises, Police Scotland, and elected members were invited to attend. He remembers attending these. He's not been invited to such a thing in recent times, and he was wondering, are there still such meetings to engage between the licensed premises and Police Scotland locally? Obviously, that I presume would be the Long Haul Community Policing Team covering Broughty Ferry. And is there a possibility of re-engagement with involving the 4 local elected members in the Ferry ward, should these be taking place?
So I'll maybe pass you shortly, Laura, to answer the sort of specifics around that. But that's something in terms of the licensing requirements that I would expect to see that between our licensing in the department and the licensees of those premises as well. So I'd expect there to be fairly regular contact between them. And if previously there were meetings that councillors were invited to, and that's fallen by the wayside, we'll absolutely look at that. But Laura, do you have any further detail on that?
No, I agree with you that that's something that licensing do. So I will take that to licensing and just confirm. I wasn't aware that councillors were attending meetings. I've not seen that since I've returned to the division, but I'll take that away and speak to licensing and come back to you.
That's very helpful. I should say, as I understand it from, and I'm sort of slightly third hand here, but as I understand it, this was there will be individual engagement between the police and individual licensed premises. I think we all realise that, and you do a very good job. And I think that initiative you referred to on pages 35 and 41 of the papers is very, very welcome. This was more about, if you like, an informal meeting of various licensed premises with the police and elected members getting an invitation. So, if you can take that forward, that would be really, really helpful. And last but not least, my last question actually comes from my ward colleague, Councillor Michael Crichton, and it's about the information on page 41, and that's about the engagement, and very welcome engagement. And I know it was welcome because Michael and I heard it being referred to at the Harris Parent Council meeting, that the staff were appreciative of the engagement on social media and were aware of the issue that surrounds that. What I was really wondering about, because I think it's very helpful that officers engage with staff of schools in relation to use of social media platforms by pupils. I was just really wondering if there's an ongoing programme of engagement, not just with staff, but with pupils direct. Obviously, social media brings with it issues for young people, well, for everybody, frankly, but for young people. And I was just really wondering, aside from Harris Academy in our own area, if there's a wider engagement with both staff and pupils at our schools about the safe use and advice in relation to the use of social media.
Absolutely. So Laura, you'll be best placed to answer this, but I know it's a real priority for us.
Yeah, so there's no specific campaign in relation to social media at the moment, but our community officers and prevention officers are engaging with schools on a regular basis. It may well be, if that is something that we're needing to look at as a bespoke input, that we need to look at that. And I can certainly discuss that with our preventions team if that would assist.
That's very helpful indeed, and I'm grateful to your answers to all my questions. Sorry, Jason.
Sorry, just very quickly, Councillor. So if you follow our Facebook, you'll see us routinely in schools. So we aim to magnify each one of those engagements that we have within the schools by use of our social media that is really well followed, and that we really try and push that messaging.
Yeah, thanks for that. And yes, I do follow your Facebook and your I was going to say Twitter, is it not called X now, but whatever. Yes. But to the credit of Police Scotland, and I have to say Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and indeed the City Council, very proactive in terms of social media messaging, and I think that's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, next is Councillor Cardell.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a couple of questions, if I may. I have to apologise, my camera has to be off because my internet's been a bit patchy. Sorry about that if you're not seeing me. So it's just about the drug enforcement in the ferry that's referenced. I wonder if you could just elaborate a little bit on maybe how many premises you visited, how many officers were involved, and maybe just elaborate also on the measure you used to judge the evening a success. Thank you.
Laura, I'll allow you to field this one.
Sorry, Councillor, I don't have that information to hand in relation to the specifics, but I can certainly obtain that from our long haul community team and come back to you if that would be in order.
Okay, thank you. That will be fine then. I also have another question on a separate subject, and it's a bit more general regarding the organised crime gangs you referenced from the Western Balkans. Now, obviously, the Western Balkans is quite a big area, so are these gangs from different countries there, and are they coordinating together, or are those competing gangs from different countries, and that then in itself might pose future problems for Police Scotland?
So Laura, I'll go first. So again, without wanting to single out a single country from the Balkans, being that they tend to these groups congregate within nationalities. So I'm aware of there's been somewhat of an increase in terms of cannabis cultivation. So that's a new methodology that's come in where quite large units have been rented out, and then the electricity bypassed, and cannabis cultivations have been put in there. So in terms of that's a trend that we are seeing. We're not overly seeing any sort of conflict at the moment between different groups from the Balkans, if that makes sense. But we're definitely seeing methodology around cultivations, as I say, the drug supply market, and also sort of the sort of historically well-known shoplifting, organised crime that takes place as well, that in part accounts for some of the increases across the UK that we're seeing in shoplifting figures. So Laura, I don't know if you've got anything more to add to that, more specifically locally.
No, I think that probably covers it, boss. Nothing else to add.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, Bailey Wright.
Thank you, convener. This is just a question on the report to begin with. Under 3 performance, Appendix A. I had problem trying to find Appendix A, and then of course the document must be taken from another document, so there's further confusion about the official number of the page and the page numbers that we have. Is it safe to assume that your official page 1 and page 27 is actually the Appendix A?
You've got me confused now,
apologies.
Councillor, but Laura knows the answer to that, hopefully.
Apologies. So the documents were provided as separate documents, and I note this time that all of the documents that have been provided for this meeting have been put into one, which is the first time I've seen that. So apologies, because I'm referring to the pages on the police report alone, the standalone report. So apologies for that.
My question's on the ASBO incidents, and you said that over the 5-year period it's down 20.4%, but the latest one was minus 3.8. As one of the local members there, I think it's one of the most sort of high profile things I have to deal with as antisocial tenants, and I think that's increasing. So what I would like to ask is, how do you record the incidents? Is it every individual one is recorded, or do you record them as the address that you're having to go to? And my other question on that is, obviously there seems to be the only line on antisocial tenants, which really doesn't tell me a lot, and I was just wondering about any breakdown that you have on them.
So thank you, Councillor. I maybe deal with the first point first in terms of the ASB figures. So one of the things and this is where the 5-year average needs to be taken within the context of COVID. because antisocial behaviour significantly dipped during the COVID years, as did a lot of these crime figures. So that's why it's a little bit of an anomaly in terms of the reporting bit over that 5-year average. So it's probably, again, it's not irrelevant, but what I prefer to do is take last year, because that was more of a return to normality. So how we're doing compared to figures last year is probably a better barometer of how we're performing. In terms of the breakdown of the ASB, so that Laura, I don't have an issue at all with sort of breakdown to ward level in terms of those antisocial behaviour figures. But again, maybe it's one for consideration of a spotlight on particular areas also. But again, that's something maybe we could take off table with you, councillor, if that would be better. Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, I would appreciate that. It's not usual for me to be on mute, but thank you for that information. I will take that up. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, Billy Scott.
Thank you. My question is really a follow-up to the question that was asked by Councillor Cordell in regard to the organised groups that are operating in Dundee in respect of what it says in the report, industrial scale cannabis. And I wondered whether you're able to maybe put that into, maybe quantify that a bit more as to the extent of that, because it does say further on in the report, it gives an example of £18,000 worth of cannabis that was recovered in Lansdowne Court at a premises there. So I just wondered, the premises that they're finding, are they forcing entry into the premises, or are they cuckooing people into making properties available to them? I just wondered how it operates.
So maybe if I answer that first, Laura. So what we found, there's been a variety of properties across the Tayside area. So I think we had a snooker club was rented out. Generally they rent properties but then bypass, and the bypass is different from what we've historically seen because it's done at street level. So they get effectively subcontract the work out, and then which is significantly more dangerous, rather than at the mains. It's at street level and sort of bypassing a lot of the electrical mechanisms, if that makes sense. In terms of, I don't want to spoil the next quarter's reporting, but I think what was the value of the latest one we had, Laura? Do you remember, in terms of the cannabis cultivation? I want to say £2 million, but so they are, when we find them in these premises, they are quite industrial in scale. So yeah, but I think that was pretty well publicised on our Facebook. So I can find out for you in terms of that exact figure and come back to you.
And with the education process that says you're working on a proactive media approach and raising awareness of the community and so on, if premises are being rented, I take it part of that will be encouraging landlords to check on their premises to make sure that it isn't being abused.
Absolutely, Laura, you're nodding your head. So that target hardening of premises is absolutely part of our approach around prevention.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll maybe ask a few questions myself. Obviously, given that Dundee's the drugs death capital, I'm pleased to hear that there's a very proactive approach being taken by the police. So that's excellent. I hope when you get them into court that the judges take a very harsh approach and issue a decent sentence for the damage that people do with these encouraging people into drugs and the effect that it has on families. The initiative that you've had in the ferry, going around with sniffer dogs and the like, sounds to me a very proactive initiative. You've obviously evaluated it as being a worthwhile exercise. So I'm wondering when you would intend running that across the rest of the city, given that, I think that you would send a very proactive message to the individual that sits in the pub and sees them going in traps 2 by 2 and wonders, what their local's becoming. So, and that's wide across the city. I mean, I've mentioned it to police in the past and never had a response. So this looks like a great initiative, but I'd like to see it rolled out. So if you could elaborate on that, it'd be great.
So I'll take your first point for, and then I'll bring you in, Laura. Apologies. So yeah, absolutely. In terms of the work we do around stigma, around the use and addiction in general, that has been a massive sea change in terms of policing, especially in Scotland, and that the public health approach we take towards addiction now. We're definitely not complacent around that. Although things have improved, the work still needs to be done, and we still need to refer people into recovery. So absolutely clear on that. The second part is I would absolutely encourage Laura to look into the second part of that, the wider use of that initiative, because I agree in terms of making the locals and the pubs that are frequented as hostile as possible to substance use. So Laura, I don't know if that's something you can take forward and explore.
It is, what I would say is that the initiative in the ferry was very much based on intelligence, which we tend to be led by intelligence. So there were reports coming into us of increased drug use in the ferry pubs, which we've then responded to, and it's also been publicised on social media. I think the boss said that, but you may well have seen that pictures of the dog in Broughty Ferry, which people always like to see on social media. But if we are receiving reports of specific activity going on in particular areas, then we will certainly respond to that. We would love to be proactive in every area in Dundee, but that obviously is dependent on our resources as well. So it is a bit of a balancing act for us, and I'm sure you will appreciate that.
Yeah, I certainly would welcome it being played out in other areas. I think there'll be, I would hope that you've got enough intelligence in other areas to suggest that they also have a problem, because, you know, I'd hate to say that it's the feedback that I get, and I'm sure that every other councillor gets it as well. So be surprised if you haven't heard some of the locals that will have a drug issue going on. I'll leave that with you. The other issue is in relation to the motor vehicle crime. And given that motor vehicle insurance is going up, it went up last year considerably. I know some elderly people that have never had an accident in their life with their vehicle. It could almost be deciding for them, I can't afford to insure my vehicle, I'll have to give it up. So, you know, it's a bit twofold that if the premium goes up that high because of vehicle crime, then we'll end up with more vehicles on the road without insurance and more people taking a chance. And, you know, I'm wondering what other initiatives would be by way of, you know, I don't know whether police or insurance companies are the one that should be putting the message out. If you fit a tracker, you know, if you put an immobiliser in, if you've done whatever, that may well bring your premium down a bit. So, but really concerned about how do we resolve the problem, and what we're looking out for the point of view of vehicles going about uninsured.
Thanks. So yeah, there's a multifaceted question. So I think first part of it is it's kind of both the police's responsibility and insurance companies to to protect their investments, I suppose, first of all. What we are highlighting is sort of the modern trends around vehicle thefts. So as Laura mentioned earlier, the keyless thefts for us are a real challenge, and for the insurance company, because it tends to be very high value. I don't want to single out one particular make, but I'm sure you've seen it in the news recently in terms of their ability to be stolen, it would seem, on a more regular basis than other vehicles. In terms of the tackling uninsured drivers, so our road policing colleagues obviously have ANPR, so that's automatic number plate reading technology within their vehicles. We have multiple cameras across the country that flag up cars when they go through that don't have insurance. So we will always deal with that, and I know road traffic colleagues is a particularly dim view they take on uninsured drivers, because they do cost us all. So and that's absolutely the same for local policing that I lead as well. So wherever we find people that are uninsured, we'll definitely prosecute them. So but I think it's a dual approach. So it's that prevention message that comes from, you know, our social media, but again it's the enforcement bit as well, and two-tiered. So Laura, I don't know if you've anything to add in terms of a more localized piece for Dundee.
Not a lot to add. We have put out social media campaigns locally as well, just in recognising the keyless thefts and giving crime prevention advice, but very much what you said, boss. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks very much for answering these questions. There is no further. Is this report agreed? Okay, thanks for that. We'll move on then, Willie.
Okay, thanks very much, Convener. Item 4 then is Internal Audit Plan Update and Progress Report, and Cathy Wiley's here to speak to that item.
Okay then, Cathy.
Thanks, Convener. This is the update report on the progress with the plan and where we are with the internal audit recommendations that have been agreed. But I've also got a couple of updates on the global internal audit standards and the external quality assurance review that's currently underway. So just very briefly, in terms of the revised internal audit standards, the new global standards were published in January, and the SIAS ones that we need to comply with will be reviewed during the course of 2024. There are quite a few changes in the new standards, and I'm proposing to wait until the SIAS ones have been revised, because I don't want to be taking time to change things that we maybe won't need to change, because I don't think a lot of the changes will actually make a huge difference to the way that we're actually, or rather the quality of what we're delivering. It's just some of the ways we need to record things that might change. So I'll keep you up to date on that once things progress with that later in the year. In terms of the EQA, I have reported to you previously that we should have had that done last year, but for various reasons, mostly to do with resources in the reviewing council as well as ourselves, that had been delayed. We've now put in our self-assessment that was done in November and December last year, and the review is underway. We had a meeting earlier this week with the reviewing council members from their internal audit team, and we've provided some additional information that they've asked for. I still don't have a time frame for them for when this will be finished, but I'm keeping in touch with them, and we'll have another meeting towards the end of this month where I'll get a further update on where they are. In terms of our own delivery of the plan, you know, before I've told you that we did have a vacancy within the team that's gone on for a bit of time, and we've taken some time to think about what we wanted to do in replacing that person. While we were in the process of making the final arrangements for advertising the post, one of the other team members who had been ill for a while also put in their resignation. So we've got 2 vacancies at the moment. However, we are fairly far through the progress of appointment, and we've got 2 preferred candidates, and we're just in the final stages of agreeing references and what have you with them, and I'm hoping that they'll be in post very soon, and that will obviously help us to make some inroads into catching up with the delivery of the plan. I've also had some discussions with Assets, who are the external contractor who provide IT audit for us, but the contract also allows us to have them providing some general audit work, so they're going to undertake some pieces of work for us as well. We had a meeting earlier this week to discuss that. The services have all been told which pieces of work these are going to be. The scopes for most of these pieces of work have already been agreed, so I'm hopeful that these will be in progress fairly soon, and when I come to give you your next update, I'm hoping that we will see some movement in where we are with progress in the plan. The plan is obviously in the report that you've got in front of you there. We have progressed a lot of these items that are still not finished. Further field work has been done, some draft reports have been issued. The big change from what's there in terms of finalising things is that the cybersecurity report is now complete, and that's going to be reported to the City Governance Committee later this month. I've also got information in here about the recommendations that are still in progress of being implemented. We do have a number that are past their original or revised due dates, and we're currently in progress of discussing with services to get these dates updated. Some of them have already been done. Once I've got the new members of the team in place, I'm going to get one of them to have a look at all of these older ones just to try and get these cleared off as quickly as we can. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that. I see Billy McPherson's got a question.
Yeah, thanks very much. First of all, a really daft laddie one, Cathy. On page 61 and again on page 62, when it talks about assurance level, it has FTF, reasonable. Now, FTF to me is face to face, but it probably isn't a face to face. What actually is that actually trying to tell me?
Sorry, we've probably got that somewhere else. I'll make sure that's in there. It's now I'll have to think. Fife and Forth Valley. It's the NHS auditor who does the audit work for the IJB. And I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly what FTF is, but it's to do with the areas that it covers. Fife, Tayside and Forth Valley, I think it is. So I'll make sure that's in the next report.
That's fine. It's obviously it's an audit provider as opposed to some acronym or whatever.
Yes.
So that's fine. Perhaps a little bit more substantially, my question is about the information on page 63, and it's probably less for Cathy and perhaps more for Robert if he's on the call. I'm not sure if he is, but certainly I noticed that Paul's on the screen. So either Robert or Paul, and it's really about the information. And I've alluded to it before when the audit was completed, and that's the general ledger audit, which was September 23. And the only reason I'm raising it is it was one of a relatively small number that had limited assurance. And I was just really wondering if corporate services colleagues could indicate what progress there is in meeting all the outstanding items, as it were.
Robert. Paul.
Convener, I'll let Paul come in. He'll be closer to the detail.
Yeah. Paul.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Detailed update in terms of where we are with progress in implementing the actions. Not all the actions identified in the report are due to have been implemented now, but I can confirm there's progress being made. I'm happy to share further detail with all members of the Scrutiny Committee in due course.
That's very helpful, Paul. Thanks indeed.
Okay, thanks for that. Is there any other questions on this report? This report agreed? Thank you. Okay, Wally.
Okay, thanks. Item 5 is the Dundee Integration Joint Board Internal Audit Report, and again, Cathy Wiley will be speaking to the item.
Okay, Cathy.
Thank you. So this is one of the pieces of work that we did for FTF on behalf of FTF within the IJB, looking at operational planning, and this is one that does have their reasonable assurance, which equates to our substantial assurance. And this one was on operational planning, looking at areas around the governance and the way that the planning was undertaken, project management, and also some of the reporting mechanisms that they had around performance. And there are a number of good areas of good practice and actions that have been agreed. Obviously, this is a report for the IJB, and it's been to their audit committee already and been discussed there. And so it's really just coming to you for information.
Okay, Billy Wright, so you've got a question on it?
Yeah, thank you, Cathy. I'm looking on page 92, the risk assessments, and somehow I've always been used to seeing a number against the risk assessments, and you have fundamental, you're saying that there is none, significant and moderate. Is that two different issues with that? Or is the risk at 2?
No, the risk is not at 2. What that table there on page 92 is telling you that there are 2 recommendations that are assessed as significant,
right,
and therefore there's a weakness in design or implementation of the key controls, and that requires action to avoid exposure to significant risks. And then against moderate, it says there are 2. Again, there'll be 2 moderate actions within the report, which means weaknesses in design or implementation of controls which contribute to risk mitigation, and that requires action. And obviously, in terms of the colours there, you can see in the further down that table you go, the less risk is involved in terms of the exposure for the area that the action is designed to cover.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be helpful for Dave to sort of alleviate on that, because there was a number of issues that I noticed on I think for page 80 onwards, just about some of the things that haven't been achieved, that there's been a slowing down of the progress. So I was curious about that.
Dave, you happy to make a comment?
Yes, thanks, Convener. Thanks, Bailey, right, for that. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of those, the four particular areas, and Cathy's just kind of described kind of where they sit in terms of the sort of risk assessment. So, and we'll have kind of provided a management response and kind of management actions to be taken against each one of those. In terms of the priorities, we've got the ones that are kind of more significant risk will be kind of given kind of higher priority. As kind of similar to kind of Cathy's kind of description in terms of the council's internal audit kind of function. We do have some capacity issues, particularly under sort of strategy and performance side of things, which we're trying to kind of rectify, because they're where a lot of the sort of the work needs to be done in those particular kind of actions areas. But relatively, I mean, kind of content with the fact that there's only two significant kind of areas of risk identified from what was quite a substantial review.
Sorry, Helen, you're on mute again.
Yeah, thank you, Dave, and thanks, Cathy, for that.
Okay, I see no further questions. Is this report agreed? Okay, thanks. Let's move on again then, Willie.
Okay, thanks. Takes on to item 6, Council Plan Mid-Year Progress Report. This was remitted to this committee by City Governance Committee on 4th of December 2023.
Yeah, so don't see any questions coming up in the chat on this one. So is this report agreed? Okay, thanks for that. Next again then, Walt.
Okay, thanks. The remaining item 7 is the Neighbourhood Services Service Plan Mid-Year Progress Report. This was remitted to this committee by City Governance on 22nd of January.
Okay, I had a question that I'd given to officers earlier, but I'm happy to wait on that. It's in relation to the get it right first time performance, but I'll wait on that answer, given that I wrote to officers about a week ago on it. Is there any further questions? No, is that report agreed? Okay, that I think completes the business then, Willie.
Yep, that's all the business, Convener.
Thanks very much. Thanks for guiding us through that, Willie. Cheers. Okay, Abby can go with him now, or if you've got work to do, knock on me.
Thank you. Cheers, Joe.
Bye.